For 9 years, the King of the Ring event was the WWF's big June pay-per-view, and it had a lot of iconic moments and some stinkers as well, but nevertheless, it was firmly part of the company's Big Five collection of pay-per-views each year. But after the way Brock Lesnar dominated in 2002, why even bother holding another one for 4 years or so? It's time to see what the company's new pay-per-view offering would be for the month of June with Steve Austin presents Bad Blood, aka Eric Bischoff presents Bad Blood, from June 15th, 2003 at the Compaq Center in Houston, Texas. This show was nominated by Ellis Watson, Roxanne Rasco, Mr. Bleh, and Chris Breezy over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. This is a Raw exclusive pay-per-view, no input from the Blue brand this time around. This is back when they at least, sort of cared about keeping the two brands separate. And boy, this time of year for Raw at this point is a very curious time to look back at for me. Of course, I'm still only a few years into my wrestling fandom. I'd lived through the highs of the Monday Night War and the Attitude Era, and now, after the invasion and whatnot, business overall is down, and creative just isn't as creative as it once was only a few years before this. You got Stone Cold and Eric Bischoff, this odd couple dynamic as co-general managers. The Intercontinental Championship has come back into the fold on Raw after being retired for no flippin' reason the previous year, and after a rocky false start that saw the two younger members in the group get injured, we are starting to see Evolution form once again and begin to gain strength. It's also worth pointing out this is the first use of the Bad Blood pay-per-view name since 1997. That was the first, and at that point only one. That version had two Ds in the word bad, and of course that's the show that's best known for Kane's debut in the Hell in the Cell match between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Also, that show was known for, that was the first day that they found out that Brian Pillman had died. So I don't know if they had gone so long without Bad Blood as a show name due to that connotation, or maybe it was just the fact they kind of changed up pay-per-view names that weren't the Big Five a lot during this time, so it was just kind of in the bin for a while before they decided just to kind of bring it back out. But I thought it's interesting. It's the first time since that first show they bring back the name Bad Blood, and they're going to do it again in 2004. Then they're going to stop until this year, 2024. The opening hype package talks about jealousy, rage, and contempt, highlighting the three main storylines in this show. They're even using some old WCW footage for Bischoff and Goldberg and Jericho, which I appreciated. 10,000 folks in the Compaq Center, 385,000 pay-per-view buys. It's up from the previous June pay-per-view, which was King of the Ring '02. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler on commentary. We can also see esteemed dignitaries Winnie the Pooh and Tigger sitting front row hard cam. I did enjoy parts of this set. It's kind of stripped down in some places, but I liked the big, cloth blood drops that were part of the staging. But man, these name graphics are just so boring, so plain. In your opening match, the Dudley Boyz take on the team of Rodney, Mack with Teddy Long and their new partner, Chris Nowinski. Nowinski, of course, is the first Harvard grad in the WWF. It would stay that way until David Otunga came along. He was also the runner-up in the first season of Tough Enough, which was won by Maven Huffman. And more importantly, today he is a leading neuroscientist that has helped change people's perception and understanding of concussions and head trauma so much in the last couple of decades. And I think that his work, obviously his legacy is going to be his work in dealing with concussions, of course, after his career was cut short by a concussion himself. I really did want to see more of what Nowinski had to offer as a wrestler, and was bummed that he was eventually taken out of wrestling for his injury, but I think obviously what he has given to the sports world with his research on concussions, I think, is more than made up for that. Speaking of injury, he is working with a broken nose here. It's why he's wearing the big face mask. And I have to say here, in 2003, between his opposition of the invasion of Iraq, which he, of course, debated Scott Steiner over on TV, and this storyline here, he is really, into this, he's portrayed as the evil liberal elite, this Harvard grad who, he confronts the Dudley Boyz on Sunday Night Heat before this, and he asks Devon, "Why is your white brother ordering you to get the tables?" It's already a weird enough kind of team. Let's take these two mid-card acts. They're kind of, not doing anything, and put them together, see what sticks, because Teddy Long and Rodney Mack have been a unit for a little while at this point. Teddy Long famously fired D'Lo Brown, we're not down with the Brown anymore. You got to back the Mack. In comes Rodney Mack. And so they're doing that, and now Nowinski joins in too, because Rodney, Mack, and Teddy Long are doing this kind of anti-Whitey storyline. They're doing the white boy challenge on Raw every week, and so now Nowinski has kind of joined their cause and asking the real tough philosophical questions to the Dudley boys. Bubba Ray's all over Chris at the beginning. Then we get this cutoff that does not look like how it was supposed to go. Well, let's forget that happened. Just a lot of illegal man action in this match that, of course, Nick Patrick is the referee who bears witness to all of this. Devon gets a case of ring postitis. Nowinski misses an elbow drop. Devon gets the tag to Bubba, who goes on a nice run. Bubba with a nice crossbody from the second rope. Chris goes to use his mask as a weapon. Bubba sees it coming, does the flip-flop fly. Rodney goes for the blackout. Bubba escapes, shoving Rodney into Nowinski. We get the was up. Devon get the tables. Devon's about to go for it, but Teddy Long on the apron reminds Devon about the big question. Devon actually giving it some thought here. We actually get a little bit of introspection in the middle of this matchup that allows the baddies to get the jump. Nowinski decks Bubba with the mask and pins to win. I'll give it 1 star out of 5. It was a short match. There was a lot of just like bad officiating and bad legal man syndrome happening in this. And the more that happens, especially at this point when we actually took that shit seriously, damn it, it can take you out of the match for sure. And, you know, I did like that moment at the end where they bring up the question, like, how is your white brother asking you and making you do all the table lifting? You know, I like how they kind of played with that for a moment. There was a bit of humanity in that. It's just too bad that as far as I can recall, they never really bring this up ever again. And speaking of something else they'll never bring up again, how about the Redneck Triathlon with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Eric Bischoff? Let's back up a little bit and just kind of explain how we got here. Of course, Austin came back into the fold earlier in the year, had that big squash match with Eric Bischoff at No Way Out. He had his last match for 19 years at WrestleMania, and then afterward was doing this, you know, co-GM thing with Bischoff on Raw. And so there's all this conflict there. They're always at odds. Then eventually Eric says, look, I don't want to have another match with you, but I wouldn't mind some other kind of competition. How about 3 competitions? Ooh, a Redneck Triathlon it is. And so it's up to Austin to come up with all these ideas for the Redneck Triathlon. What are some fun activities that rednecks do? And so they kind of repurpose the Raw roulette wheel by putting all those different items on there. And throughout the night, we will learn just what kind of activities we get. Up first is the burping contest, and I don't know how else to better describe this scene other than Bischoff and Austin burp syncing, I guess you would call that. That's what they do here. They make some motions with their mouths with some burp sounds over it, and it's gross. And Austin's burp is the biggest, loudest, and also at one point sounds like a dragon's roar. So yeah, Austin wins the first round in the triathlon, the burping contest. Somebody kill me because this is gonna be a long night with these stupid skits. But hey, let's brighten the mood a little bit. Let's have 2 guys fight over the rights to have a woman. It's Test versus Scott Steiner. The winner gets Stacy Keibler's managerial services. So Scott and Test, they've been a tag team for a bit, managed by Test's girlfriend Stacy, but now Test is being a big old jerk, and Scotty, the champion of women everywhere, stands up for Keebs, and now they're gonna have a match to see who fights for Stacy's services. And on the go home Raw, Test, of course, real big meanie, real big jerk, and he tells Stacy, I'm gonna make you my whore. And like, ooh, boo, Test for saying that. But how is that any different, or how is it any worse than Scott Steiner going, you know my freaks, I take them to the big O in the sky with the Saturn and the stars. Stacy comes out to the Kid Rock cover of Legs from the Forcible Entry album. The lyric, I want her so I have to have her, as Test is grabbing her off the apron for himself, is expertly timed. What a heel. The match begins with Scott Steiner, of course, slipping off the apron and eating shit while trying to do a dive. Test using Stacy as a human shield distracts him so he can take over on Big Papa Pump. Test is all over the place in this matchup as a heel, and the way he's like jaw-jacking and getting heat and everything, because I don't know if he took extra pre-workout or what, but he is almost like a different person compared to how we see him in the ring usually. He's strutting around, he's flexing, his rubbing his butt. He's breaking out every move in the heel playbook, stealing some moves from Scott Steiner. And as this is all going on, of course, you've got the commentators talking, and Jim Ross talks about Stacy Keibler, and he has a line where he says, "Her heart is as beautiful as her pleasant face, in my view." Test dominates Scott for a while. He goes flying off the top. Steiner catches him, and boy, they have to work hard not to break Test's neck on that suplex. Scary looking power slam on the comeback as well. Test goes for a pump handle and the boot, but Scott is staying on top of him. Test does end up hitting the pump handle slam, but Scott kicks out. Stacy's up on the apron to distract Test. He calls her a whore again. She slaps him. Test ends up hitting the boot on Scotty, who kicks out again. Test now grabs a chair. Stacy tries to stop him. She gets a shove. Test's chair shot attempt backfires, and Steiner hits the STO to pin and win. Now Stacy is happy, Scott's happy, everybody happy. I give it 2 stars out of 5. This was quite the hoss fight, I guess you could call it that. It was very physical, and I liked the moves and the offense they each gave each other here. And I guess you can't have a Steiner match ever, Rick or Scott, without having some kind of like, holy shit, someone's gonna break their neck moment, whether it's Scott experiencing that or his opponent. And so we got that here, certainly. And Test's, like, the way he was like selling and posing and everything, it was so ridiculous, it kind of like circled back around to being great, honestly. But hey, you know what? This rift between Test and Scott with Stacy in the middle, don't worry, because soon Test and Scotty will be friends again, and they're both gonna hate Stacy.
Misogyny bros, yeah.
We hate women.
Misogyny bros, yeah.
Treat them like property.
Backstage, Bischoff and Austin are chatting about the triathlon, and Bischoff is very excited about the next round, the pie eating contest. He takes Austin down the hall to a room with lovely ladies who are all there presumably to eagerly have a sex act performed on them in front of thousands of people on pay-per-view. Like, what is Eric Bischoff expecting here exactly in kayfabe? Like, what are the fans meant to expect? Are we meant to expect that these women are going to come to the ring and then everyone's going to watch while Austin and Bischoff take turns like engaging in oral pleasures on pay-per-view? Like, come on, y'all, what are we doing here? Anyway, Bischoff and Austin are fighting over who will go first in this one. Austin thinks about it and says he'll let Eric go first only if he gets to pick the flavor of pie. God, I hate this and where this is all going. But like I mentioned, last month at Judgment Day, the Intercontinental Championship came back. It was retired the previous year in that winner-take-all match with Triple H and Kane. And then after several months of inactivity, Austin said on Raw one night, we're going to bring it back. And so there was a battle royal at Judgment Day to crown the next Intercontinental Champion. Booker T had it won, but the referee was taken out and didn't see it. Christian ended up winning sneakily, and now we get this one-on-one rematch in Booker's hometown of Houston. Christian, by the way, has really reinvented himself here. After he won the title, he got this brand new look, dressing differently. His hair was cut short, and he's talking about his peeps. That's another thing. The peeps are getting over, and to the point you see a lot of signs in the audience as the weeks go about it. And wouldn't you believe it, WWE never capitalizes on it. Booker T is dominant in the early going, but Christian snapping Booker's neck on the top rope to take over for a bit. Booker catching him in midair, hits a big flapjack.
It's called the flapjack. Okay.
Booker back on the offensive, Christian catching him with like a sneaky pin attempt. Jerry, speaking of attempts, Jerry needs 3 attempts to get to this one tacky joke about being in Booker T's neighborhood off.
I went to Booker T's old neighborhood today. I walked around there. Guy came up and asked me, he said, have you seen any cops around here? Well, I told you I was walking around, and one of the guys that lives in the neighborhood came up to me and said, have you seen any cops? The guy said, have you seen any cops around here, King? I said, no. He said, good, stick them up.
Big missile drop kick by the Booker man. He hits the spinneroonie. Christian powders, takes his belt, and he goes to leave. The referee gets on the mic and warns Christian if he's counted out here, he will forfeit the title. Christian runs back in and out of the ring. There's a bit of a chase. He hits Booker with the title belt right in front of the ref to get himself disqualified. I give it 2 stars out of 5. I enjoyed the work with these guys here. It's just disappointing to have that BS finish at the end. Booker T would go on to win the Intercontinental Championship about a month later on an episode of Raw from Montreal. So Booker did get that moment to win the IC belt, just not in front of his hometown in Houston. Though I think looking at the rest of this show and just kind of seeing how it all went down and how the fans kind of reacted to everything. Might have been nice for the hometown to get that rah-rah moment of Booker winning here. It's time now for the second round of the Redneck Triathlon, the pie-eating contest. Jerry Lawler is the MC for the event. He brings out Bischoff and Austin, the latter of two getting a big reception in his home state. Austin bringing the heat with his insults to Bischoff here, saying, "Eric Bischoff, more like Eric Jerkoff." Ooh, he really got him there. We get this live shot of the ladies from earlier watching backstage. Which one are we going to start with? We're not picking from any of them. It's Mae Young time. Waka waka. Bischoff has some great lines here where he says, "Put that tongue back in your mouth. Get your hand off my ass." Bischoff refusing to go through with this indignity, but basically Austin says, "Hey, if you back out of this, then I win the Redneck Triathlon." So Bischoff ultimately swallows his pride and says, "Whatever, let's do it." And he goes to kiss Mae Young, and Austin's like, "That doesn't count. This is a pie-eating contest." So Mae Young reveals some lingerie and gives him the Bronco Buster, to everyone's delight / disgust. Bischoff, give him credit, he is doing some great selling on the outside. He tells Austin it's his turn. Austin gets ready and hits Mae with a stunner. Impeccable bump. Austin forfeits the round, giving Bischoff the win. One apiece. I hate this. I would also argue that most people watching and witnessing all this, even many of those who participated, hated this as well. But as we all know, I'm sure there's one guy who appreciated this all going on, and of course, his was the only opinion that mattered. As we wonder if the tag team champions Kane and Rob Van Dam are falling apart at the seams or something, Jonathan Coachman is backstage with La Resistance, those dastardly French (Canadians). Sylvain Grenier says it's unfortunate they have to spend tonight in Texas. It's the state that gave the world that buffoon, George W. Bush. Rene Dupree then says they will dedicate the match to their home country, quote-unquote, of France, and the greatest president, Jacques Chirac. I'm kind of surprised that their promos at this time didn't also end with them going, "Ha ha ha ha," just to drive the point home. Up next for the World Tag Team Championship, Kane and RVD defend against La Resistance. And the story, like I mentioned, is that there seems to be some friction between RVD and Kane. Kane becoming a little less reliable each passing week and really leaving Van Dam high and dry. RVD goes on a nice early run as JR and King discuss French food like squab and snails. Monkey flip attempt by Van Dam is blocked and we get some double teaming. I love Jim Ross in this matchup here because he is just fired up for no reason. He's like, "God damn, I hate these La Resistance kids. They're so aloof and arrogant. Sylvain acts like a 10-year veteran the way he skirts around the locker room." Don't think that use of the word was not intentional. Kane gets tagged in and he's throwing both Rene and Sylvain around like a couple of stale baguettes. Some double teaming on Kane. Well, Sylvain's trying to help here at least. La Res gets dumped out of the ring. Kane goozles them, but RVD ends up diving onto him by mistake. The double choke slam to Van Dam, the cover and the win. La Res are the new champs to a stunned Texas crowd. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. My one complaint about this match was I wish it went a bit longer. There's a few matches on this show that I think are a bit shorter than I would like it to be, and I think that if this match got more time, it would just have been a better overall. But this is just one more chapter in the story as Kane continues his decline, and it won't be long now before he is totally unmasked and goes crazy and beats up RVD. Well, after angling for it 5 years earlier in a different company, Chris Jericho is finally getting his one-on-one pay-per-view matchup with Bill Goldberg. The story started the previous month on TV when someone tried to run over Goldberg as he was getting out of his limo. Steve Austin investigates and finds that Lance Storm was behind the wheel that night, so he asks who put him up to it, and eventually Storm points the finger at Chris Jericho. Oh my God, the thrill seekers are in cahoots again. Jericho admits to it and says, "Yes, I did put Lance Storm up to try to hit Goldberg with a car and kill him." And the reason for this was because nobody wants you here in the WWE, Goldberg, especially me. Jericho talks about their past in WCW, how apparently they used to be friends, but Goldberg was moving up the ranks really fast while Jericho never moved up despite all his efforts. So he got jealous, he left WCW and went to the WWF to become this great star that he is today. And so So I like how they took some elements from the actual story of like 1998 into account when doing this. I think there's a part of me that goes, well, why didn't they include all the mockery Jericho did of Goldberg during this time and the Jericho 4-0 and whatnot? And, I guess it's because if they really wanted to explain that storyline, then they would have to, A, kind of concede that it had been done before. And also, they would also make Jericho seem a bit more sympathetic in this. Because I think, as I talked about in my videos about Fall Brawl 98 and Chris Jericho and WCW that I've done recently, Jericho does look very sympathetic when he's trying to get this angle going and Goldberg doesn't want anything to do with it. So I can understand why WWE would put a bit of a sheen and kind of omit that detail. But Jericho does do a lot of stuff to piss him off. He's maced Goldberg, he hit him with a spear, he threw paint on his vintage car, and he made Goldberg spear Charles Robinson by mistake, and he's blasted him with a chair. And oh yeah, these two actually did have a backstage altercation earlier in the year. Apparently it was in April at a Raw in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Goldberg had only been with the company for maybe a couple of weeks at this point, and already apparently shit was getting stirred up. And Jericho heard that, this is all according to Jericho's book, that Jericho heard that Goldberg was talking trash about him. Jericho confronted Goldberg about it, and Goldberg's like, well, Mike Tenay said you were saying mean things about me on the internet. And then it turns into this tussle that eventually gets broken up, and Goldberg's trying to grab Jericho's hair, and Jericho's like, what are you doing? You're acting like a goof. And Goldberg says, your mother's a fucking goof. And then, according to the story, Booker T is there. He's like, wait a minute, did you just say his mother was a goof? That's the worst insult I've ever heard. So this was all in the first month or so of Goldberg being in the company. And I think this was something else that also kind of built the legend of Chris Jericho. The fact that he got into this fight with Goldberg, who not every wrestling fan was a fan of to begin with. And also a lot of WWE fans had been kind of conditioned to trash on Goldberg at this point. So I think there was a bit of a rehab process with that, obviously. But yeah, Jericho getting into that fight with Goldberg, I remember that being a real big issue. And the fact it was right out the gate with Goldberg being in the company, that was not a great sign of things to come. They would make up for it. They would apologize and be very cordial and respectful to each other after this, evidently. So, it's one of those things where sometimes you have to fight to get out this issue, this bad blood, so to speak. And they did it, and then after a few months went by, they finally got their program. From the get-go, they tumble out of the ring, and Goldberg starts throwing them strikes and knees. Goldberg back in the ring doing this front slam, and I swear he makes this big grunt sound followed by a little bleh when he lands. On the outside, Berg goes for the spear but just plows through the barricade instead. There's a big Goldberg please go away sign in the front row as Goldberg is now bleeding from the noggin. Jericho with the missile drop kick, working the shoulder extensively. Y2J goes for a twisting flying nothing, but Goldberg kicks him out of the sky to boos. Jericho's still fighting. Goldberg struggles to get a hip toss or a suplex maybe off. Jericho with the face buster, the lion salt, but it looks like he lands right on Goldberg's head. He goes for it again, does the lion salt attempt. Goldberg can't quite catch him. They improvise. Goldberg hits the spear, goes for the jackhammer, but Jericho rakes the ref's eyes. You get this big old low blow, which is responded to by a rousing Y2J, Y2J from the crowd as he puts on the walls of Jericho. Goldberg's able to power out of it, hits another spear, the jackhammer. Goldberg wins, then gets in Tigger's face at ringside. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. I sure hope Jericho got what he wanted out of this after first, campaigning for this matchup so long ago, because this was rough. Goldberg was out of position on a lot of things, and, there was a few noticeable botches in this one, and Jericho seemed to be really working overtime to get Goldberg to look good in this matchup here. And you could tell the fans were turning on it. They didn't like what they were seeing either as the match got rougher as time went on. And, that was kind of an anomaly. It's not like this was the beginning of the fans shitting on Goldberg forever. That wasn't the case because Goldberg was still very much over and popular as the rest of 2003 went on. But yeah, Houston, I think it had made their minds up. Maybe there was some past bias. Maybe, the smarter crowd, they might have been aware of the backstage conference confrontation, or they might still have the memory of what happened in WCW, ringing in their ears. So, or maybe where they were just tired of seeing Goldberg screwing up all the time here. Oh, there's a hog pen there all of a sudden. King asking if those pigs are JR's relatives. Backstage, spin the wheel, make the deal, spin the wheel, make the deal. It lands on a sing-off. Austin looks upset because he can't sing. Terry verifies this, while Bischoff looks as happy as a clam. We'll see how this all unfolds. It's a grudge match pitting generational wrestlers against each other. This is the match before I'm Sorry, I Love You at WrestleMania 24. This is Shawn Michaels taking on Ric Flair. So a few weeks ago, Flair wrestled Triple H in a title match on Raw and nearly beat him. Really got folks sympathetic to Flair, who's been Triple H's lackey for the last several months. It's being hinted he would break away from the game. Shawn Michaels tries to lure Flair away from the dark side, talks about how he grew up watching him. He's the all-time greatest. It's one of the first of many of your Ric Flair speeches that he will get over the next several years in this company. So you got Flair kind of tearing up, thinking, oh, do you really think I have what it takes to be my own man again? And Triple H comes in and berates Ric Flair, and then it leads into this handicap match that night in the main event. But psych, Flair sucker punches Shawn, and so the swerve is there, and he's back with Triple H, and Randy Orton is back from injury now as well. So you see Evolution start to rebuild, and Flair's calling Shawn a Ric Flair wannabe, and it's a good basis for this matchup here. It's the first time in a very long time they've ever faced off. They did back in the olden days when Flair was last in the company, but a lot has changed since then for both. This is during that time in Flair's life and career where his confidence is shaken and the company's trying to build it back up. And as the match begins, we start out with some graps and some slaps to the face. Shawn working over Flair. He's flopping hither and yon, but HBK turns his back on the Nature Boy. He hits a big old chop block. More knee attacks. He locks in the figure four. Shawn fights it for a while before we get this rope break. Flair and Hebner each give a shove. Both wrestlers are trading strikes. Flair goes up top, predictably is thrown off, and after some more action, it ends with Shawn getting his own figure four locked in. Flair breaks it with a thumb to the eye. Shawn gets a little cheeky. Flair goes up top a second time, goes for a flying nothing, but walks right into a right hand. Big superplex by HBK. This table is now set up on the outside. Flair gets onto it like he's easing into that warm bath. Suddenly, Randy Orton comes in. Shawn super kicks him. Shawn goes up top, twisting dive onto Flair through the table. Wow. Flair is now bleeding from his back, or maybe the back of his head. Still not enough to beat him. Ric Flair hits double dick kick city combo. Shawn hitting his comeback moves later, though. He hits the flying elbow, sweet chin music, then thwack, a big old chair shot. Orton dinks Michaels, puts Flair atop him. We get the count and the win for Flair. Finally, a good match on this show. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. This was a great matchup for Flair, great showcase for him, showed that he still had it, and Michaels was a great dance partner with him. And, obviously with these two, on paper, it was going to be good, and it played out very well. And like I said, this is my favorite match of the night. This is the best match of the whole evening. So set your expectations low for the next one's all I'm saying. And of course, they're going to have an even better, more fantastic match just a couple years later for WrestleMania. I'm Sorry, I Love You. That was a classic, but this, of course, started building the blocks, building the foundation for what that match was going to be. It is time for the long-awaited conclusion to the Redneck Triathlon, the sing-off. Bischoff has resumed selling the Mae Young incident when he wasn't in the last backstage bit. Bischoff lip-syncs his own theme song. Then Austin shows up on the screen and calls him out for it. You gotta sing the karaoke version, what? Bischoff tries singing along for real, and he sucks at it. Austin admits that he's no better a singer, so why don't they just wave this round and spin the wheel one more time? Oh, look at that. It landed right on Pig Pen Fun. Austin says he will deputize the whole audience to grab Bischoff if he tries to run away, and Bischoff says, I'm undeputizing you all. That was pretty brilliant. Bischoff tries to flee, but then Mattress Mack, who I had to find out who this was, it's Jim McIngvale, the famous owner of Gallery Furniture, apparently. He throws him back in. Stone Cold shows up and beats up Bischoff in the ring, gives him a stunner. He brings Bischoff up to the top of the stage and throws him right into the hog pen. Oh, those poor cute little piggies, don't scare them. Fuck this. Fuck the Redneck Triathlon. This was just really dumb. Like another great excuse to embarrass Bischoff. I'm sure Vince McMahon loved that to death, but man, this was such a huge waste of time, and there's No real sugarcoating that. Sorry. Main event time. It's heck in a sec for the World Heavyweight Championship as Triple H defends against his former good buddy Kevin Nash, and Mick Foley is the guest referee. Back at Judgment Day, Kevin Nash was screwed out of the title by DQ. He got a measure of revenge with a powerbomb through the announce table. Austin then makes a rematch for the two of them in a Hell in a Cell match. Meanwhile, the referees have all decided they do not want to officiate this match on account of it being too dangerous. They bring up how Tim White, his last match was a Hell in a Cell match, and that ruined his refereeing career. He was never able to do it again. So the referees don't want to do it, and so Austin has to pick a special guest referee. So they bring in Mick Foley as the special ref, the man with so much history tied to the cell. Please give this man something to do, basically. We got Hunter Hearst Bluesley over here defending the belt. Nash is off to a good start. A lot of clubbing blows and knees in the corner. He throws H into the cell wall multiple times. Nash is also the first man to use a steel chair, and he gets to whacking. Triple H is just getting beaten pillar to post for a while. He finally gets an opening when he dodges the steps being hurled at him outside. Nash trying a jackknife on the floor, but Triple H saves himself, brings out the toolbox, and then Hammerhurst Helmsley hits Nash in the knee with a ball-peen hammer, then hits him in the head with it. Aces and eights, eat your heart out. And well, that honestly makes the sledgehammer, like from here on out, look really tame by comparison, because the sledgehammer shots never looked good. These did look good, but we are far from the finish. Triple H lets Nash sell on the outside while he and Foley have a scrap. Nash is now wearing the crimson mask, and Triple H grinding his face into the cell. The H-Man produces a barbed wire 2x4 from under the ring and beats up Nash some more. Nash, who by the way is still able to walk perfectly well, now grabs the 2x4 and hits Triple H, and now he's a-bleeding. Nash sets up the 2x4 into the corner and gives Triple H a snake eyes into it. Stares have entered the chat, H cracking Nash in the head with a crate. How do you like them apples? Now out comes Sledgy. Referee Foley takes the hammer away from Trips. He takes a punch for his troubles. Nash hits the drop toe hold on Triple H, takes his face bump onto the steps. I also love how Triple H put the steps down just before taking the face bump. It was like this, floop boom. Trips comes back, he dinks Nash, then Foley with the chair, and now Foley is busted open. He brings out Sacco and gets the mandible claw on the champ. Nash hits both Triple H and Foley with the steel steps. Even Sacco has looked to have gigged here. Foley knocked off the apron into the cell wall. Crazy bump here. He's going to be out for a minute. Nash has got the match won. Foley comes back in. Somehow Triple H kicks out from the jackknife. Triple H hits Nash with the sledgy. There's the pedigree. He makes the cover. Foley with the reluctant count. The champ retains in this bloody affair. Flair and Orton come out to pick the champ up and celebrate with him as the show fades to black. I give it 3 stars out of 5. This match was okay. I think that it's kind of a match style and just an environment that doesn't really help Nash. I never really saw him as much of a brawler with hardcore elements, kind of like Triple H. I think Triple H was versatile enough that he could kind of go back and forth between doing just a straight up wrestling match or then one with weapons in it. I think Nash had one kind of match he could really do, and depending on his opponents, he could have a great match or just kind of a so-so match. And this one didn't really play to his strengths, I don't think. And if it weren't for Mick Foley there as the referee, it'd be a much more boring match, because Foley was clearly there to take some of the bumps, the crazier bumps that neither of the other guys were going to take. So I think that it was fine for Triple H. It was right up his alley, and Foley was a much needed bit of spice in this thing. But yeah, I never really bought Nash when I was watching at this point, live as it was happening, and watching it again for this review. I just never buy Kevin Nash as a viable world title contender or main eventer in 2003. Certainly not as much as guys like Kane or Rob Van Dam or Shawn Michaels or hell, even Ric Flair at this point, the way that Flair was being presented and set up. And so Nash, I never bought that with him. Even at the time, I was like, he's only here in this spot because he's Triple H's friend, and that's kind of how this happened. It was a feud that never really did anything for me. So my final grade for Bad Blood 2003, brought to you by Stone Cold and Eric Bischoff, I'm going to give it a C-. most of the undercard was okay, if only a little bit short for their match times. You know, Jericho, Goldberg was unfortunate. The Redneck Triathlon was a crime against humanity, and I'm glad they've never done anything like that again. But at least the last two matches had some heft to it and were actually like fun to watch and, you know, told good stories. And so I think those last two definitely saved the show overall from being a total dumpster fire, but it had a lot going against it. That's what I'll say. Not the best look for Raw during this time. SmackDown, still much better. But what did you think of Bad Blood with a single D in 2003? How about this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Well, next time here on the Classic Review, we are going to travel back in time and celebrate the 30th anniversary of the 1994 Survivor Series. We're going to have the Kings versus the Clowns. We're going to have Bob Backlund versus Bret Hart for the WWF Championship. And hey, Chuck Norris, sign me up, brothers. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.